So today we're going to talk about MCPs. And if you asked me a year ago, would I be doing a session about MCPs? I haven't even been doing this for a year. I've been doing this for about 3 or 4 months. I would be like, no, I don't. I think MCPs are going to die or something like that. But here we are, still talking about MCPs, which are really just connectors and apps that you can connect to AI. And MCP is just a relatively simple way to do that. So I just wanted to talk about how we can use Claude and integrate it in and all that. You can use the same stuff with ChatGPT as well, and whatnot too. So, okay, I think there's a bunch of folks here. I'm sure some other folks will trickle in. I also didn't expect this to be like a blowout topic, but it's one I really wanted to do because it is one of the bigger unlocks when it comes to AI when you're using these bots and stuff like that. And again, this will work with Claude. It'll also work with ChatGPT and just about anything else you're using, as long as they have apps and connectors. And some of them even still call it MCP. But at the underlying layer for a lot of these connections, hey Hong, is MCP. So again, I know some folks are introducing themselves and saying what's up. I'll start in about 30 seconds or so. But for anyone that doesn't know, I'm Heaton Shah. You probably found me on Twitter or LinkedIn and found yourself here or on my email newsletter. And I'm doing these things because I just want to help you. So yeah, again, introduce yourself, say hi and whatnot. And also, if you have any questions and you just come up with any along the way, I think for folks who have been here before on one of these, we're going to go fairly quickly, but it will be easy to understand, hopefully. And we will get done and then we'll have a Q&A. So feel free to ask any questions while we're going or at the end. And these are all fairly quick kind of lessons or sessions or whatever you want to call it. So again, jumping right in, what you're going to learn is what these MCPs are and why they actually matter for you when you're doing work in these AI chatbots. I came up with my list of categories of the ones that are worth checking out and installing, how to connect them really easily, and you won't need any technical skills or anything like that. Even if you have them, you don't need them for this. And then also how to use them together so that Claude can understand your work instead of you explaining it every time. So really, if you want to ask me what is a value prop for these MCPs or whatever, it's the fact that you don't have to keep re-explaining things or bringing in context and things like that. But I'll get right into that as we go. So I wanted to give kind of a little more definitive sort of answer on what is an MCP. So it stands for Model Context Protocol. Now, I had to think about this for a minute as making these slides and thinking about this topic because I was like, well, that kind of does explain what it is. So really, an MCP enables a model to have and use context from whatever thing the MCP is. So it's really just about how it creates a connection between Claude and a tool you already use. And so instead of you, which is something I did, I actually have been known to take Slack threads and like copy them and then slap them all into the AI chatbot like Claude and use that as context. What I actually started doing before MCPs or evolved into was I'd actually open a new Google Doc, shove all the context I wanted in there, annotate it a little bit like, hey, this is a Slack message about this, or this is a email about that or whatever. And then I have this sort of context doc. I might even download it as a markdown file, and then I'll save it and then shove it into AI all the time when I needed some context on that. And if I was lucky, I've already had a long running conversation about the same workflow or topic or thing. And then I could just keep going back to it. But that has a lot of faults and does break. It's kind of brittle when you do it like that because you're trying to shove the context back in to the AI chatbot almost every time that you're trying to do it. So it's not really the ideal way to do it. And so then when I really got around and wrapped my head around the MCPs and the connectors and all that, I was like, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. And the AI can become smarter almost instantly. So jumping right in, let's talk about just the basics here of how do you connect your first MCP. And this is specifically for Claude. All the tools now have areas like this and things like that. So, and as you all know, if you've used these products, they're kind of changing their UI and UX pretty regularly. So I found with these sessions, it's pretty useful to at least show the current state and talk through it. So the current state is you're going to go get into Claude Usually I'll use the desktop app. So let's say you're in the desktop app because it has co-work and code and all that stuff. And you're not going to see plugins anymore. There used to be, I think, a time when you would just see plugins right away. What do you see? You see customize. So you want to click on customize. I learned that the other day that they changed that. So here we are. So then you get to see this thing that says skills, connectors. Okay. And then you see browse plugins, right? So still, you might be a little confused. I was. And then I was like, oh, okay. They're changing the name of all this stuff. Let's go to connectors. That sounds like what I'm trying to do. So then I went to connectors and here we are. These are basically MCP powered connectors, for lack of a better word. So you probably won't see MCP too much anywhere in the language as much as it used to be, but this is what's underlying what's powering all of these things. Then if you clicked on one after you kind of install it, you're going to get this screen. And this is a really powerful screen. One of the questions I regularly get and people like to ask is, how do I make sure it doesn't do things that I don't want it to do? So as you can see here, like there's a bunch of write delete tools. This is a Gmail connector, and you can easily just say, I don't ever want it to do these things. So I don't ever want it to create a new label. Maybe you don't ever want it to create an email or send an email for you. You can set these settings here. So I know a lot of people get concerned about connecting these things and what they can do. I get concerned too. So after you connect, you can go in here and it even gives you a good idea of what's possible and what's not possible. And then just start hitting that X where you want it to, or the always allow where you want it to. I tend to always allow read only because that's really most of the majority of what I'm trying to get out of most of these tools. If you're really trying to get it to write emails and stuff, you can obviously keep that on and even create or send the emails, but I don't necessarily recommend that just because AI might do something you don't want it to do. So that's kind of the sort of 101. What are these things? They were called MCP. Now they're called apps or connectors in most of the tools. So that's what you're looking for when you go in those tools. But the real value comes in when you look at the permissions once you connect it and how you can very granularly control the permissions. It's such a big piece of the puzzle. It also gives you a hint, if not more, at what the MCP can actually do. Because if you start looking at this list, you're essentially able to look at capabilities and things like that. All right. So I promised to talk about which MCPs are actually worth installing. So I'm going to sort of dig into this a bunch. There's only 3 categories here that I recommend starting with. Obviously, you can get way more advanced as you go. So the first category is what I would label shared knowledge. So, you'll notice I have Notion here. I also have Granola here, and I also have HubSpot. So these are actually, this is a meta category where you're looking at places where documentation is. So that would be Notion, Google Docs, Atlassian's, Confluence, things like that. Or you're looking at like where other types of knowledge are, which would be like Granola. So meetings, things like that. So Zoom, Granola, there's a number of these. Sort of Fathom is another one. So there's a number of these products. Most of them, if not all of them, have MCPs now. And even if not MCPs, ways to connect, which is usually through the connectors and usually MCP. Also, these products have their own pages about their MCPs, which you can throw an AI chat at and say, hey, here's the MCP for Notion. What can I do with it? So you could even do those kind of little things before you connect them. And then finally, I put HubSpot in here. So that's really to say products like HubSpot have historically been like a system of record. So any kind of system of record would be shared knowledge. So HubSpot has your CRM data. Obviously, then you understand what's happening with customers and deals and things like that if you connect HubSpot's MCP as well. So this is like really low hanging fruit and all of that stuff. And then when we get to the next section, I'm going to talk about a workflow, and then we can sort of, even if anyone has any questions about brainstorming a workflow, we can talk about that. So again, this is shared knowledge. And the whole idea here is just to bring the knowledge into the AI chatbots. And the knowledge can be the documents that are being written and what tool you're writing those in. So where your knowledge actually exists, things like transcripts, and then of course, CRM or other types of things. Even your email provider could probably be in here as well in the shared knowledge category. Then we have communication. So this would be Slack, email, in this case, Gmail, or even Superhuman. And this helps actually round out the data set, frankly. So imagine if you're in HubSpot, you have HubSpot connected, then you connect these email tools, then all of a sudden you can correlate things like, oh, we were talking via email prior to them becoming a record in HubSpot. So this is where stuff starts getting connected that the AI can almost automatically do. So you can even start asking things like between the CRM and the email. You don't have to ask it like this, but you could. Between our CRM and our email, tell me more about Acme Corp and every interaction we've had with them. And if you were the one on the deal, your email has emails about it, you would be able to correlate all of that. And that is the power of AI. These are the types of things that, even a year ago, I was trying to put into chat and AI when I was building that at Dropbox, and it was not as easy or as possible as it is today. And now we can do it with, Claude and just connect it up, or ChatGPT and connect it up. We're good to go. So I think communication's a big one. The reason I mentioned my example is a lot of people think about Gmail, Superhuman or Slack or even Google Calendar, things like that. And they're like, oh, I'm going to improve my productivity. Like, no, 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 that's cool. But it's when you improve workflows around things you're actually trying to get done, not just the emails you have and things like that, that things really start clicking and you start actually seeing productivity gains over just manage my email for me. So really it's about getting all this kind of data into these chat bots and then basically utilizing them across the data sources for things you're trying to get done that would be much, much harder to do without these tools. And then last, but obviously not least, if you're working at a tech company or a company that has code, Linear, GitHub, so things like even Atlassian's Jira, if you don't use Linear, and obviously GitHub or even GitLab if you use GitLab instead of GitHub. Although Linear and GitHub tend to be what most companies are using that aren't stuck on Jira for whatever reason. I will not make this a conversation about Jira, but it could easily be. So basically, this is really powerful and probably one of the more powerful ones across an entire company. And let me just give you some examples of what I've found to be almost one of the most useful things. So when GitHub's connected to a Slack bot, and I'm not an engineer, things I like to do is actually go ask it things related to what features exist in the product. So if the chatbot has access to GitHub, it knows all the features that our product has. It also knows things that people might be working on, especially when you add in Linear and other things. So imagine how powerful it is for me to just say, based on our code that's live, what are all the features that exist in the product? And building a corpus of that. Obviously, you can get it to verify it if you don't trust it. So you can say, please double check, blah, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden, I have this record that actually is from GitHub of the actual features. Then I can say things like, transform this into language that a customer would understand, or imply what type of customers would get the most value from each feature, or just you can go to town from there. And yes, there's other sources for features and things like that on your website or in internal docs. But when you add it and use the sort of code itself and have the AI understand that, it actually kind of changes the game in terms of how much power you have and how much detail you can get into in a lot of your copy, and even be able to answer questions like, do we do this yet? Do we do that yet? What's coming next? One of the biggest questions between sales and marketing and product and then engineering is, when's that thing going to ship, or what's shipped, or whatever. These things are all obviously table stakes that these integrations can do. So I think code is a sort of underappreciated integration outside of engineering, but it should be appreciated quite a bit more, in my opinion, because it has a lot of context. And of course, if the engineers are, don't want you writing any code or anything, yeah, I said understanding code. So you don't need to have write access or write any code into GitHub. If you have read access, you can do a lot with this, even if you're not an engineer. So I would encourage you folks to kind of think through that if you haven't already. Okay, so MCPs in action. So I kind of gave some examples, but I wanted to give one sort of somewhat very specific example that I think for all of us that are communicating outside the company, this is a pretty good use case. So this is all fake data. It's completely planted context within my tools that we use to create kind of this demo. So this is basically a Notion page with the notes from a previous meeting, calendar meeting, and an email from Dario. And so these are three things that are essentially in three different, somewhat siloed places, if you want to call it that. Two are in Google Tools, and one is in Notion. And in the Google Tools, those are kind of connected individually through their MCPs. Last I checked, so you'd connect Gmail and Calendar, and then Notion, of course. So let's say you've connected these things. Once you've connected them, you can simply ask something like this that literally says, "Prep me for my next meeting." This was all actually done. Don't want to demo it because demos go terrible, but these screenshots were actually done. So now what happens is that Claude takes that and now uses the MCP connections to gather the relevant context to actually answer the prompt. So you notice it went through Notion because it probably thinks or knows that notes are in Notion, went through Gmail, and then was able to actually got everything that it basically needed. And then it essentially also found the scheduled meeting, pulled context from what we discussed last time, found the latest email correspondence, and then it used that info to inform me what to prep for the meet. And this was because I had all three things connected. So this is the power. And you can imagine all kinds of workflows off of this or that are similar to this, but for when you have two or three different tools and the data sitting in those different places. So again, what took me as a product manager, things I had to map out and think through about what users could do and how to connect all these things into a chatbot is now literally instant once you connect these things in your ability to have the AI go find all these things for you and do it. So again, one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because I wanted people to understand how powerful this is. And I felt like almost every conversation I had with folks using AI, there was something I could tell them about how these things connect together and how the AI chatbot can actually just fly through this kind of workflow for you, which normally would be, I don't know what, an hour of work to prep for a meeting. That's squished down to a matter of minutes just because I have the things connected and the AI is pretty powerful and smart now. But obviously ignore the end dashes and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, we're still getting really great output. And these are the kinds of productivity improvements that I'm seeing are kind of the lowest hanging fruit that not everyone's doing yet. So what to do today, if you want to do this, some quick instructions here. Claude, it's open Claude, go to settings, go to connections. In ChatGPT, it's ChatGPT settings, then apps. In Gemini, it's Gemini settings, then connected apps. So again, your mileage may vary in 5 minutes once one of these companies vibe codes something new and ships it and changes the interface entirely. I'm half joking, but this is kind of how you get to them. And like I said, you can connect these apps to all of these tools. All of these tools have good enough models now where when you ask some simple queries, they go in and try to figure out using what they call tool calling to go figure out where is the data, what tools should it, well, first, what tools should it use? And then what kind of queries should it do? And all that is sort of happening for you instead of you having to do it. So you get to essentially query all of your work tools for one chat window. I think that's the TLDR and value prop that I would get to.